So a woman was on a retreat, and it was a directed retreat. So she went to see her spiritual director to get something to pray about. And he gave her this story to pray about, the story we call the Prodigal Son. She said, now this was Ignatian contemplation prayer, kind of prayer, where you use your imagination. So he said, now you go take that story, you read it, you imagine all the scene, you put yourself in the scene and become one of the characters in that story, and then see what happens. And then you come back and tell me what happened during your prayer. Use your imagination. So she comes back the next day, and the director says, so what happened during your prayer? And she says, I am not going in that room. I'm not going in that house. She says, my husband who divorced me is in there, and his new wife is in there, and I know they're both in there, and I'm not going in that tent. I'm not going in that house. I'm not going to the party because I know they're both in there. In our gospel, we have this story that we call the Prodigal Son, which is not really the best name for it because it's full of surprises. And one of the surprises is that there are two prodigal sons, not just one. And so the question is, who's the worst? Who's the worst prodigal son? And we all know about the first son. We all sort of focus on that. That's all pretty clear. But this is a story that is very familiar, but is also full of surprises. And so it's not just one prodigal son, it's two. And who's worse? Well, the second son is probably worse because he has dishonored his father, maybe worse than his younger brother has. They both dishonored their father, but look at how we know how the first son, we know how he dishonored his father, but look how the second son dishonored his father. The father says, the father is incredibly generous. Everything I have is yours. It's always been yours. I don't have locks on the doors. It all belongs to you. But what was the son's attitude? Well, I can't receive that love as a gift. I have to earn it. I got to get some points so that I can twist my dad's arm into saying, no, I'm not receiving it as if you owe me. I have obeyed you and now you owe me. But the father it's always been his. And so he has the sin of self-righteousness. He can't receive the gift as a gift. He's got to get some angle on it. He's got to have something so that he can't trust the generosity of his father's love to be a pure gift. And so he thinks he has to get a leg up on his younger brother, and he's got to get a leg up on his father, and he can't trust his father to love him completely. And so he's going to make some points. He's going to rack up some points. He's keeping score. He's better than his younger brother. He's keeping score, and he's going to earn that love, and he's going to be able to say, you owe me. He's a worse sinner than his brother is. He's older and he should know better. So he's worse than his younger brother. Salvation, what's behind this story, of course, is that the salvation of God. How are we saved by God? We are saved by God by the acceptance of the gift of salvation. The gift, the free. God is like the Father. God is the Father in the story. Everything I have is yours. It's all gift. And the elder brother is the worst. He's the worst because he can't do the one thing you have to do with a gift, which is receive it. The father has been giving him the gift his whole life, and he's never been able to receive the gift. He's never been able to just say, I don't deserve it. You're not giving it to me because of me. You're giving it because of your generosity. And so I receive it. He can't receive the gift of the Father. And so salvation is not something that we earn. We all know that. Salvation is the gift of God. And the way that we are saved by God is we receive the gift as a gift. Not something we got not something we, not because of anything we did, because of everything he did. And so they're both prodigals. Who's worse? The elder brother is worse because he doesn't know how to receive the gift of everything, of all of the love and the mercy of God that's been, of his Father that's been offered to him. He can't receive it as a gift. He can't trust that it's a gift. He's got to get an angle on it so he can control it. Some people say that this is the scariest. What's this? That's maybe the scariest parable that Jesus ever told. And what is scary about it is, if we think it in terms of our own salvation, everybody is invited to heaven. God is saying, everybody's invited to heaven. Come on in. There aren't any locks on the gates of the afterlife. Anybody can go to heaven anytime. Unless, of course, you don't want to. Unless, of course, you're like the woman, the story of the woman who said, I'm not going in there because I know my ex-husband and his new wife are in there. You get them out of there, then maybe I'll go into the celebration of your mercy and love. But I won't go in there as long as they're there. And that's the most terrifying thing about this story, is that what Jesus is saying is that everybody's invited to heaven anytime. There are no locks on the doors of heaven, but some people won't want to go. Some people will say, oh, no. No, I know who's in there. And because I know you would forgive them. I know your mercy and your forgiveness is so scandalous, you would forgive them and take them in. See ya. And so that's what hell is. That is exactly what hell is. Hell is refusing to receive the gift, the free gift of God. It's the refusal of it. It's being invited into heaven and saying, no, I don't want to hang out with God, with someone like you who's so scandalously forgiving and merciful and loving. And I certainly don't want to hang out with the kind of people you want to hang out with, these repentant sinners who fumble their way through life, these knuckleheads who fumble their way. I don't want to hang out with them, and I don't want to hang out with you. I'll go someplace else. And so nobody is damned to hell. The only people in hell are the people who choose it. They choose not to go towards love, but mercy and the free gift of God's love. They choose to go in the opposite direction. And so notice who Jesus is telling this, was right at the beginning. Who's Jesus telling the story to? The Pharisees. The Pharisees are there. So what's Jesus saying to them? You're going to have a whole lot harder time getting into heaven than the prostitutes and the tax collectors. Because the prostitutes and the tax collectors, they know they don't have any points. They don't have any points with God. They can't twist God's arm to get mercy and love from them. They have nothing. They know they have nothing. So it's easier for them to say, I'll just receive the free gift. But it's going to be harder for the Pharisees. And it's going to be harder, frankly, for you and me, because we're the good churchgoers. I'll tell you who's going to have the hardest time receiving salvation from God. It's going to be Leaf and me and Sister. Because we're the professional religious. We're the ones who are the most tempted to say, come on, God. don't I get a little something for all the service I've done? Haven't I racked up a few points with you? Come on, I must have a little bit of an in here. That is the sin of self-righteousness. That is what keeps us from receiving the gift of salvation as pure gift. So I said this parable is full of surprises. One of the surprises is the person who's most in danger of damnation, it's me. It's sister. It's Leaf. And sometimes it's you. It's the churchgoers who could be tempted to the sin of self-righteousness and say, well, boy, don't I get something for all those Sundays I went to church? Don't I have a claim on the mercy and the love of God? Can't I twist God's arm here a little bit and make a deal? And of course, the answer is no. We can't. We don't need any points. We're like the older son. We've never needed points. We've never needed points. The salvation of God has always been a gift. The love and the mercy of God has always been pure and total gift. And the only thing we have to do is not make the mistake of not knowing how to receive a gift as a pure gift. And so how do we up the odds? How do we up our odds according to this parable? We have to use our time here on this earth, and going to church is a really good way to do it. We have to use our time here to develop a taste for God. We're going to have to hang out with this God who's pure love and mercy and goodness for eternity. We had better get a taste for God while we're here. And we had better develop a taste for the people of God, because we're going to spend eternity with them too. And we're not going to be able to say, you get that person out of here, and then I'll go into the party, but I'm not going in there because I know my ex-husband and his new wife are in there. We can't say that. We're not going to be able to say that. So we had better develop a taste for God's people, those fumbling sinners just like us, who fumble their way through life, sometimes knuckleheads like the two sons in this story. We're going to have to develop a taste for one another. And we're going to have to develop a taste for being in the presence of God. Going to church is a good way to do that. So is praying, of course. So let's come to this altar this morning, and let's come knowing who's the real most important person in this story. It's not either one of the sons, it's the Father. It's the loving and forgiving Father. Because what's the Father trying to do? He's trying to get both the sons. He's forgiven the sin of the dissipation. He's forgiven the sin of self-righteousness. And he's trying to get both of them into the celebration of his love and mercy. He's loving, still loving, and bringing in both of them. He's trying everything he can to get both of them into that celebration of his love and mercy and grace. And that's what he's doing with all of us. So let's come here then as true children of God, the daughters and sons of God. And let's receive the gift of God's salvation, love, mercy as a gift.